Imagine placing your life in the hands of someone you trust completely, and then imagine that trust is, well, utterly betrayed.
Yeah.
That's the unsettling world we're stepping into today as we try to unpack the case of Dr. Harold Shipman.
Dr. Death, as he came to be known.
Dr. Death, a British GP who became one of history's, well, most prolific serial killers.
And what's so intriguing, even now, all these years later, is the stark contrast.
Yeah.
You know, perception versus reality.
Right.
This wasn't some shadowy figure. We're not talking about Jack the Ripper lurking in the darkness. Shipman was a pillar of the community, respected, a doctor.
In a seemingly idyllic English town.
Exactly.
It's like the ultimate nightmare, right?
It really is.
The person you turn to for care, for healing,
Right.
turns out to be the one you should fear most.
It's chilling, and the sheer scale of it too. I mean, we're not talking about a one-off, a crime of passion. This is hundreds of victims
Potentially.
over decades.
Decades.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. How does someone maintain that facade for so long?
That's the question, isn't it? How?
Yeah.
And that's what makes this deep dive, well, so compelling. We're talking about unmasking a monster piece by piece, trying to understand how a seemingly ordinary person, a doctor no less,
Right.
could perpetrate such horrific acts right under everyone's noses.
So where do we even, I mean, we've got articles, we've got psychological profiles, accounts from people who knew him.
Right.
Where do we begin to even unpack something this complex?
Well, the best place to start is usually at the beginning, wouldn't you say?
Okay.
Let's transport ourselves to Hyde, a small town near Manchester.
Okay.
This is where Shipman lived and practiced. Picture a close-knit community, the kind of place where everyone knows their neighbors. The local GP, well, he's a trusted figure.
Right.
It's within this seemingly ordinary setting that the seeds of something truly sinister were sown.
It's hard to imagine, something so horrific happening in a place that sounds so, I don't know, so normal, so peaceful. But I guess that's the point, isn't it?
Often is.
Evil hides in plain sight. So how did the truth about Shipman finally come to light? Who dared suspicion to suspect this seemingly respectable doctor?
Well, it began, this might surprise you, not with a detective or a suspicious relative.
Right.
It began with another doctor,
Okay.
Dr. Linda Reynolds. She was working at a nearby hospital, and she began to notice a pattern, a disturbing one.
What was it?
An unusually high number of Shipman's former patients were dying in her care.
Wait, his former patient? You mean people who'd been under his care previously?
Yes, exactly.
And that was significant.
Well, it was a small town.
Right.
So any discrepancies in mortality rates, they would stand out.
Okay.
Dr. Reynolds, she knew the demographics and the number of deaths linked back to Shipman, especially among the elderly.
Yeah.
It was statistically improbable. And there's another thing. Many had been cremated.
So that makes it a lot harder to investigate the cause of death, I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the cremation aspect, it really raised red flags for Dr. Reynolds.
That's incredibly astute of her. I mean, most people wouldn't even think to make those connections. It's like she was a detective in her own right.
She was very thorough.
So she noticed this pattern, then what did she do? So that 1998 investigation, a dead end. What was the twist of fate, the thing that finally brought Shipman down?
It's kind of ironic, really. It was Shipman's own arrogance, I think.
Yeah.
And the unwavering love of a daughter for her mother. That's what ultimately sealed his fate.
Okay.
Just a few months after that first investigation was dropped, one of Shipman's patients, Kathleen Grundy.
Yeah.
She was a prominent figure in Hyde, actually, a former town mayor. She was found dead in her home.
So, like you said, he was operating right under everyone's noses. Did anyone even question it at the time? Grundy's death, I mean?
On the surface, no. I'm sure it seemed like just another case of an elderly patient passing away. Tragic, but not unheard of, right? But thankfully, Kathleen Grundy had a daughter, and she refused to accept things at face value. Angela, her name was Angela Woodruff, and she was a lawyer.
Okay, so we've got a lawyer involved now. That feels significant. What did she find? What did Angela Woodruff uncover?
Well, she was going through her mother's affairs, after she passed, and she came across something strange. Kathleen Grundy's will. It named Shipman as a beneficiary.
Hold on. He was set to inherit from his patient.
A significant sum of money. Yeah, and one of her properties too.
Now that's a huge red flag.
Right. But here's the thing. The detail that really caught Angela's eye. the detail that really started to unravel this whole thing. The will. It only mentioned one of Kathleen Grundy's properties.
She had two.
She had two. And to Angela, this was a glaring inconsistency. It suggested that whoever drafted the will didn't actually know the full extent of Kathleen's assets.
Which you think Shipman, as close as he was to her, would have known?
You would think. So that's what Angela thought, too.
Wow. It's amazing how one small detail, something that could easily be overlooked, can expose such a huge deception.
Absolutely.
So Angela finds this discrepancy, this inconsistency. What does she do?
Well, she does what any good lawyer would do. Armed with this new information, she contacts the police. She raises concerns about the will, its legitimacy, and really, by extension, the circumstances surrounding her mother's death. And it was a bold move. I mean, you have to remember, Shipman, he was a respected figure.
It takes guts to challenge someone like that, to go up against someone with that much, authority, that much power.
She had courage, that's for sure.
It's a testament to her determination to get justice for her mother. So the police, how did they respond?
Well, they listened. They took Angela seriously, and they acted. Acting on her suspicions and the inconsistency she'd found, they ordered the exhumation of Kathleen Grundy's body.
Wow, that's a big step. It was a gamble, wasn't it?
It was a gamble.
But it paid off.
It did. The post-mortem, it revealed the presence of diamorphine in Kathleen Grundy's system.
Diamorphine, okay.
A powerful opioid you probably know better as heroin. And the levels, they were deemed lethal. Completely inconsistent with her medical history. And remember, Shipman, as her doctor, he was the one who had signed her death certificate.
Listing old age as the cause.
Exactly.
So the net is closing in. But before we get to his downfall, why diamorphine? I mean, it seems like an odd choice for a doctor, especially one trying to, avoid suspicion. Wouldn't there be other, less traceable ways?
You're right. It does seem like an unusual choice. And to be honest, we can't definitively know why he chose it, why Shipman chose this particular drug.
Yeah.
But there are theories.
Okay.
Remember Shipman's own history. He had earlier in his career, he had an addiction to pethidine.
Another opioid.
Right, a synthetic opioid. It's possible he had access, maybe through, illicit channels, or maybe he just believed it would be harder to detect in elderly patients.
So a combination of access and a calculated risk, that's chilling to think that he was using his knowledge, his position as a doctor to actually commit murder.
It is. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And it gets even more unsettling if you consider another possible layer to this.
There's more.
Shipman's mother. He was reportedly very close to his mother.
Okay.
She died when he was young, a teenager. Lung cancer.
Oh, wow.
And she was given morphine, to manage the pain in her final days. And Shipman, he witnessed her decline. He was there.
Right.
And some experts believe that this experience, this early experience with death, with his mother suffering her reliance on morphine, that it might have had a profound psychological impact on him.
You're suggesting that this childhood trauma, that it could have somehow warped his perception of death, of dying.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? I mean, we have to be careful about drawing a direct line between, childhood experiences and adult behavior, but
right.
It makes you wonder.
Okay, so we have the exhumation. We have this evidence, the diamorphine. So did Shipman confess? I mean, when confronted with this?
You'd think there'd be some kind of confession, some realization, that the game is up. But no. Shipman, he stuck to his story, maintained his innocence.
Wow. Talk about doubling down on the lie. He must have had nerves of steel. I mean, to think he could still talk his way out of it at that point. So how'd investigators finally, I don't know, how'd they break him? Was it just the diamorphine, or was there something more?
Well, remember how we were talking about Shipman embracing computers? Computerized medical records?
Yeah, it was like he thought it made him untouchable or something.
Right, almost like he was bragging about it. Look at me, I'm modern, I'm using technology, but really that was his undoing.
How so? I mean, how did computers lead to his downfall?
Well, see, Shipman, he thought he could control this new system, just like he controlled his paper records, forging signatures, changing things after the fact. And in this case, he altered Kathleen Grundy's medical records after her death, trying to make it look like she had this history of heroin use.
Oh, wow. So trying to create a completely false narrative.
Exactly. Covering his tracks digitally. Or so we thought.
But digital records, I mean, they're harder to manipulate, right? You can't just, scribble something out. There's got to be a trace.
Exactly. And that's where Shipman slipped up.
Yeah.
He was arrogant, overconfident, and he didn't fully understand the technology.
In what way?
Timestamps. He didn't account for the timestamps.
Mm-hmm.
Every time he saved a record, the computer, it automatically recorded the date and time.
Right.
So when investigators looked at Grundy's file, the timestamps on those altered records, they clearly showed that the changes were made after her death.
Oh, wow. So it was like a digital smoking gun.
Exactly. The technology that he thought made him invincible, it actually brought him down.
It's kind of, I don't know, poetic almost. So did he finally confess then, faced with this, this undeniable proof?
No. Even then, even with this irrefutable evidence, Shipman, he remained defiant. He maintained his innocence right up until the very end.
Wow.
But the investigation, it didn't stop there. Kathleen Grundy's case is like opening a Pandora's box, It led authorities to re-examine decades of Shipman's practices.
Oh, wow. And what did they find?
A pattern, a terrifying pattern. Hundreds of suspicious deaths, mostly elderly patients, many living alone, all of them dying from diamorphine overdoses.
And all those deaths certified by their trusted doctor.
Their trusted doctor.
It's horrific. How many victims are we talking about?
The official inquiry, which ended in 2004, it identified 218 confirmed victims.
218.
But experts believe the actual number it's much higher. Could be over 260. Some estimates are even higher than that, 500, maybe more.
500 people. It's almost too much to even comprehend. Did he ever express any remorse? What was his sentence?
Shipman. He was convicted in 2000, 15 counts of murder. He got 15 life sentences, no parole. He died in prison in 2004. Suicide.
He took the answers to his grave, basically.
He did.
Why? That's the question, isn't it? Why did he do it? Was it power? Control? Some kind of God complex, like some people have said? Or was it something else, something deeper, darker, maybe rooted in that early experience with his mother's death?
That's the question that everyone asks, isn't it? And it's the question we'll never truly know the answer to. Not definitively. Not for sure.
And that's what makes this case, this whole thing so unsettling. We're left grappling with the horror, searching for explanations that may never come.
But maybe that's the real takeaway here, isn't it? A reminder that monsters, they don't always lurk in the shadows. They can wear the face of someone we trust, someone who holds a position of authority.
Someone like Dr. Harold Shipman, it's a chilling thought, but it's an important one. It's a reminder to be vigilant, to trust our instincts, and to never be afraid to question those in positions of power, and to cherish those like Angela Woodruff, like Dr. Linda Reynolds, who have the courage to speak up, who raise their voices against injustice, even when it seems impossible.
Absolutely. They are the unsung heroes of this story.
They are. And on that note, folks, that brings our deep dive into the chilling case of Dr. Harold Shipman to an end. A stark reminder that reality can be far more terrifying than anything we could ever dream up. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep asking those tough questions.